The diner was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries tension thicker than smoke. A small black boy sat at the counter, his hands trembling as he clutched a glass of milk. Then came the sound that changed everything, a sharp slap that echoed off the tiled walls. The bully laughed, thinking he'd proven a point, thinking power came from humiliation. What he didn't know was that the boy's silence wasn't fear, it was warning. Because outside, in a black car with tinted windows, sat a man whose name made even the cruelest men kneel. And tonight, that man's patience was about to end. Before we uncover what happened when that black car door opened and the truth about who this little boy's father really was, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we share powerful stories that challenge racism, expose hidden truths, and remind the world that no act of cruelty goes unanswered. Now let's rewind to the moment that led to that slap, where one man's arrogance would awaken a storm he could never control. It was a small-town diner on the edge of the city, where truckers came for coffee and locals shared gossip over burnt toast. The scent of fried bacon filled the air, but not even that could mask the silent stares that followed the little boy as he walked in. His name was Malik, only 7 but already used to the uneasy glances, the whispers that came when his dark skin met the wrong side of town. He didn't belong here, they thought. His clothes were simple, his sneakers worn, but his eyes, steady, calm, and unflinching, carried a weight far beyond his years. The waitress hesitated before serving him, her forced smile hiding discomfort. The bully, a grown man twice Malik's size, had been sitting in the corner booth, loud, arrogant, drunk on cheap beer and entitlement. When Malik accidentally brushed against his table on his way out, the man's grin twisted into fury. No one intervened, not the waitress, not the few customers pretending to look at their plates. Because in that diner, silence was safety. But Malik didn't cry. He didn't beg or run. He simply stood there, face burning, his small hand tightening into a fist beneath the counter. Somewhere far away, in a towering estate surrounded by guards and secrets, his father was signing papers that controlled empires. He had no idea his son was standing alone in a diner where hate still breathed freely. Yet fate has a way of connecting power and pain. And before the sun would set, the man who thought he ruled that diner would learn the cost of cruelty. Malik didn't speak a word. He picked up his fallen glass, his little hands shaking only slightly as milk pooled across the counter. The bully snickered, leaning back in his seat as if he'd just done something heroic. The other patrons turned away, pretending not to see. But silence has its own kind of noise, a weight that presses on the chest, demanding justice. And far from that small-town diner, justice was already making its way there, dressed in a black suit and riding in a car that moved like a shadow. The man in the car was Dante Moreau, known to most as a businessman, but whispered about as something far more dangerous. To the city, he was a name that lived in the dark. The man behind empires, the quiet authority no one dared to cross. But to one little boy, he was simply Dad. Every Sunday, Dante would leave his world of power behind to cook breakfast for Malik, to teach him how to tie his shoes, to remind him that kindness was not weakness. But when Malik didn't come home that afternoon, something inside Dante went cold. The security team tracked the last place Malik's phone had pinged, a small roadside diner. By the time Dante's car pulled up, the bully had returned to his seat, boasting to the waitress about putting that kid in his place. He didn't notice the dark vehicles lining up outside, nor the men stepping out in silence, their movements precise, rehearsed, efficient. Inside, the air changed. Conversation stopped. The door opened with a quiet chime, and Dante stepped in, tall, calm, impeccably dressed. His presence alone made every head turn. He said nothing as his eyes swept the room, finding Malik standing near the counter, eyes still wide, cheek still red. The boy didn't cry, didn't run. He just whispered, "Dad." The bully froze. He tried to laugh it off, stammering excuses, but the sound of polished shoes moving across the floor silenced him. Dante's men flanked the walls, their faces unreadable. The room shrank around the bully as Dante approached. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. His calm was terrifying, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. Without a word, Dante removed his jacket, placed it gently around Malik's shoulders, and turned to the man who had struck his son. "Do you know who you touched?" he asked, voice low, almost kind. The bully swallowed hard but couldn't form an answer. Dante didn't need one. He looked at him the way a lion looks at prey that doesn't yet know it's been caught. Then he simply said, "You made a mistake." That's when the sound of engines outside grew louder, and for the first time in that town's history, fear replaced arrogance. The bully thought he had power that day, but power had just walked through the door, wearing an expensive watch and the calm of a man who could destroy lives with a single command. The diner felt colder than it had minutes ago. The waitress stood frozen near the counter, her hands trembling as she clutched the checkbook. The bully tried to stand, but his knees buckled beneath him. Dante didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Power wasn't in his fists. It lived in his silence. One of Dante's men stepped forward, laying a sleek folder on the table in front of the bully. Inside were photographs, details, and a list of every mistake the man had ever tried to hide. Debts, lies, and crimes buried under small-town arrogance. The bully's face drained of color. "Consider this a lesson," Dante said quietly, his voice so calm it chilled the air. "You don't raise your hand to a child. You don't raise your voice to someone smaller. And you never forget, respect is earned, not demanded." Malik watched, still silent, eyes fixed on his father. For the first time, he saw what true power looked like. Not the kind that shouts or strikes, but the kind that commands without a single unnecessary word. Dante placed a hand on his son's shoulder, guiding him gently toward the exit. But before leaving, he turned once more. "You'll remember this day," he said, "because it's the day you met consequence." Outside, the black cars waited in formation, engines humming like restrained thunder. Dante helped Malik into the back seat and gave one final glance at the diner through the window. He didn't seek revenge. That wasn't his way. The man who had hurt his son would destroy himself with the same arrogance that fueled his cruelty. As the cars pulled away, whispers began. The townspeople would later speak of the man in the suit who arrived like judgment itself, of how a single look from him erased years of casual hate. That slap had started it, but the silence that followed would echo for far longer. The next morning, the diner was unusually quiet. The same people who had watched in silence now spoke in whispers, their eyes darting to the door as if the shadow of last night still lingered. The bully didn't show up for breakfast. Some said he packed his things and left town before sunrise. Others claimed he was seen sitting alone at the edge of the highway, face pale, staring into nothing. But everyone agreed on one thing. He'd been changed. Something in his arrogance had died when Dante Moreau walked through that door. Malik, meanwhile, returned to school. His classmates noticed the faint bruise on his cheek, but also something else, an air of quiet strength. He didn't talk about what happened. He didn't need to. Those who had once mocked him now looked away, uneasy, unsure how to meet his eyes. The small boy they'd seen as powerless had become a symbol of something they couldn't quite name. Dante never mentioned the incident again. To him, teaching his son the value of restraint mattered more than revenge. "Power," he told Malik one evening as they watched the sunset from their mansion's balcony, "isn't about how loud the world fears you. It's about how calm you remain when it tries to break you." Malik nodded, understanding in silence what most grown men never learn. News of the incident spread beyond the town, stories of the mysterious man who appeared like a storm and vanished without a trace. Some called him a hero, others a warning. But for those who had witnessed it, one truth became clear. No act of cruelty goes unseen, and no act of hate comes without a cost. Years later, that diner would close down, its walls marked with the ghost of a night when pride met justice. And somewhere in that memory, a lesson remained. For every person who thinks they can measure worth by color, class, or size, there comes a day when humility arrives wearing the face of power. Because sometimes, the quietest child in the room belongs to the most dangerous man in the world.